Thanks, everybody. Unlike those girls, I have known Brian for long enough to tell you some stories, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Thanks, everybody. My name is Brian Moscow. I have the honor and privilege of being Brian's best man. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Brian, for asking me. It really means a lot to me that you would have me fulfill this role and be such an important part of your special day. You know, when Brian first asked me, he said, you should really enjoy this. You get to stand up there and just kind of make fun of me for a few minutes. And why, right, I wanted to make sure I said thank you right out of the gate, just in case you change your mind over the course of the next 5 to 10 minutes. Second, I also wanted to thank all of you for making the trip here tonight to join Brian and Roxy to celebrate. I know how much friends and family mean to the two of them, and to have you all here in support is tremendous. On the flip side, I also wanted to, on behalf of Brian specifically, thank those who couldn't make the trip today, as I know they all hold an extra special place in his heart, if for no other reason than he didn't have to pay for any of them. By way of background, Brian and I have been friends since we both started playing hockey at Bethel Park. I was in the 10th grade and Brian was just entering 7th grade. And despite a pretty relevant age gap for that time in our lives, we really just seemed to click well. We stayed friends through high school and college, even while Brian was in Michigan for hockey, or subsequently in Ohio for some of the college years. And I don't know, Brian maybe was a little more mature for his age, and there was a slight chance that I could have been less mature for mine. But nonetheless, our friendship just seemed to work out well. So fast forward a number of years, and it's really cool because Brian and I work together now at the same company, and we get to do meetings together and stuff like that, so it's fun. We're both in finance, I'm in sales, and Brian's role is to educate employees at different companies on their 401k plan, the importance of savings, and how to reach retirement successfully. So a little over a year and a half ago, my boss came to me and he said, do you know anybody that might be a good fit for this education role that we have? He said, the catch is they've got to be really passionate about saving money. And so I thought, those of you that know Brian might already know this, but just in case, I'll bring you up to speed. Brian is one of the most cost-conscious, frugal, I'm running out of words that mean cheap, but he literally has a physical reaction, almost like an allergy when he spends money. And since this job is trying to teach people how to save money, I thought, he's been teaching me tricks for years. You know, for example, when it's his turn to buy a round at the bar, it's not uncommon for Brian to have a sudden urge to go to the bathroom. A second method he might employ was when he would say, I gotta take this call, which in and of itself wouldn't be a problem except for the phone never rang. Then there was my personal favorite, which he used every time he was in my car. When we would arrive somewhere where you had to pay for parking, Brian's jeans were just a little too tight. He was just wedged in the backseat. He couldn't reach his wallet at the time, but he would get me later. And in fairness, you never really specified when later was. Anyhow, all these wonderful memories started flooding back, and I said to my boss, hey, my friend Brian would be a great fit for this job. And it's great to see the success that he's having today. You know, I see him meeting with all of these people, and they hang on every single word that he says. You know, my financial future, am I going to be able to retire? How do I get there? On one hand, I'm really proud of you, and I have to admit that. But on the other hand, I would hate to see these people's reaction if they knew that the same financial wizard sitting just feet across the table from them gambled away all his hard-earned money on WrestleMania and SummerSlam. Now, I've never been a best man before, but I've been to a few weddings, and I think that one mistake the best man often makes is to tell stories with inside jokes that the audience really just can't relate to. So I don't want to go down that road today, so I thought I'd share a Brian hates to spend money story with all of you in the room, just because you're here, so you will automatically by default be able to relate. Everybody got that beautiful invitation in the mail, correct? Yeah, working from there, yeah. Okay, so it had all the folds, all the options to choose from the meal to the shuttle and all that good stuff. Well, thanks to his new wife's intervention, and it was an intervention, there was another section of the invite that you didn't get. Apparently, Brian had some deep concerns over the rising costs of cake. so he came up with the idea that he would have an insert to the invitation that gave a referendum on whether or not you would eat a piece of cake when you were at the wedding. And he asked for a reply of yes or no. It's true. No gray area here, just black and white. No, let me see how I feel after dinner. No, wow, that cake looks wonderful. I'd love to try a piece. No, if you didn't know 3 months before if you eat it, he's not going to buy you cake, period. Now, I'm assuming that that didn't fit with the ambiance that Roxy was going for this wedding. And so she probably said something to the effect of, B, I don't think that's a really good idea. Or maybe there were other words used. But when I got the invitation, the first thing I did was look at that thing and see that there was no insert like that. And I'm sure none of you got that insert either. And I didn't see a giant eagle cookie cake in the lobby, so that being said, Roxy, it is great to see you having an impact on what has been a long-standing problem. Okay, I'll lay off the cheap stuff now. I honestly wasn't sure I was going to tell these stories up until about 2 weeks ago when I had my son's 3-year-old birthday party. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw Brian violently shaking one of those quarter machines where you put the quarter in the top and it knocks a few more quarters off the bottom. Literally all for the sake of like a yield of $2.50. And at that point, I knew this was the way to go. My wife did warn me, though, not to overdo this topic because she said Brian might be looking to pay me back in the future, to which I told her I was not worried. Some of the most fun times in my life were with Brian and a couple of other friends during our annual summer vacation to Myrtle Beach. It was on these trips that I learned of some of Brian's other very impressive qualities. For example, he was very persuasive. We went on these trips 4 times, starting at age 19 for myself, which would have put Brian at just turning 16 years old. And to this day, I still cannot believe that you convinced your mother and dad to let you go. But Brian, I will say, Brian brought a lot to the table. He was the only one of us that could cook. Which helped to earn him the nickname that week of Chef Boyardee. At breakfast, you could always count on Brian's pancakes. We came running to the table every morning with our spoon and knife ready. Those of you who think I misspoke, I didn't. I said spoon and knife. Brian's pancakes were consistent. They were consistently crunchy around the perimeter, and in the middle, they had a surprisingly soupy quality. Something that only a spoon and knife could really tackle. For lunch, we look forward to our steakums and chips ahoy. Yes, Brian kept everyone well nourished for that week. And aside from the occasional inappropriate comment at guys that were the size of a refrigerator, or groups that outnumbered us by 5 or 6, we really appreciated Brian's efforts. Brian also displayed tremendous determination. I remember the year we were going to the 18 and over club in Myrtle Beach, and Brian insisted for months ahead of the trip that he had an ID that would do the trick. Myself and the others had some significant concerns, but Brian was adamant that despite this being a Michigan ID, and us all being from Pennsylvania, despite it peeling in multiple places, and despite the fact that the person in the picture wasn't necessarily even a white male, this ID was bulletproof. In fact, he spent the whole week telling every group of girls we met that he was 21 years old. It started becoming one of those lies that he actually started to believe it, I think, until he met the bouncer at Club Kryptonite. As I mentioned, we didn't quite agree that this was going to work. Our bickering back and forth had turned into a bet as to whether or not he would get in. So I went first, then our friends Josh and Jesse went, and the 3 of us waited anxiously while Brian handed over that ID. Bouncer looked at Brian and he said, sorry man, he threw his ID into a bag. Brian said, wait, that's my ID. He looked and the bouncer says, sorry man, in an arrogant yet stern voice. Brian's response was to say, what do you mean sorry man, how am I going to get home? We looked at each other and we said, "Are you serious? Is that really the route we're gonna go?" And the guy said, "You want to try this again, or should I call the cops?" At this point, as you can imagine, Brian had his tail between his legs a little bit. And we did what any good victor would do at that point. We asked him to pick us up around 4 a.m. And he did. So you held up your end of the party. Now, Brian may have struck out with the bouncer, but in my final example, I did learn that he had a great ability to think on his feet. As I mentioned, he liked to tell the girls he was all 21 years old, and he did this for a number of years. Now, they say every good lie has a lot of details, and after 5 or 6 days of this, I guess being 21 just wasn't enough anymore. Now he was 21, played hockey collegiately, and the letters on his jersey said Miami of Ohio, not BPHS. So I remember us all being on the beach talking to a group of girls, and everyone exchanged names as to where they were from, what their names were, where they went to school. And one of the girls says, "Well, my name's so-and-so, I go to Miami of Ohio." And our eyes just lit up. Naturally, we were quick to point out that Brian here had been to Miami of Ohio for a number of years now. He was a big deal at that school. And suddenly you can see 6 days worth of accumulated confidence just exit in about 2 seconds. The questions for myself and the other guys just started coming from all sides. "Brian, what dorm do you live in again? What was the name of that bar that you took us to that time we came up to visit?" And I have to say, despite all our best efforts, he managed to hold up that charade the entire time. So well played. Joking aside, this is a guy with tremendous qualities. As I've gotten older, I've realized that the people you can call true friends and that you know will be there at the time that you need them are few and far between. I'm proud to say that Brian certainly fits that bill for me. This is somebody who's been there through every stage of my life, from middle school on. Met every girl I ever dated, been there for every life event from graduation to college, from marriage to the birth of my son. Most people that fit this description are family, and I would say that Brian is certainly like a brother to me. Roxy, you've really found a top-notch person who I know will be a fantastic husband and father. On the flip side, you can always tell when a friend meets somebody that's a little more special to them than any of the others, because they just aren't around as much as they were before. We've all done it. I did it with my wife, and most of my friends did it as well. I remember when Brian met Roxy, and we could tell there was something different because his priorities switched from what we were all up to over the weekend to spending time with her. It was clear how much he valued their time together. Now, eventually, he did start to share her with the rest of us, and I'll say that Roxy has been an awesome compliment to Brian, and my wife and I are happy to call her not just a friend through Brian, but a friend on her own. As for advice, I would just say keep doing what you're doing. You guys are great together, and I know you will continue to be. I would just say enjoy this night, because it will fly by. Enjoy the honeymoon. You'll be back here in the middle of winter before you know it. And when you get back, all the stress from the wedding will be over. You can relax, and with all of our help, through our wonderful gifts, together, we will make your bank account great again. And with that, please raise your back.
I can't raise your hand.